Good morning to you,
Good
Jane.
morning.
And we're seeing the euro just marginally higher today. This is just part of the whole volatility of it.
I think so. I think we're seeing some short covering today. You know, there has been some talk, particularly yesterday afternoon, that there could be some intervention. The market's getting a little bit spooked about that. But really, I would say, from an analyst point of view, that probably will not happen. And the reason for that is that if you look at the academic studies written on the ECB's website, you will see that they don't actually really support intervention. They think that intervention will, over the course of time, increase volatility. So no real signs of that yet. So a little bit of short covering, but really, you know, those economic pressures are still very much on the euro.
Now, the ECB, of course, didn't support buying bonds either until they did. I mean, can you see a level at which the ECB would get involved, or a level at which they would have to try and support the euro?
Well, you know, I think it's been said, you know, many times, it's not really about levels, it's about the rate at which that euro falls. And certainly, if there is evidence of disorderly markets, and some strategists are beginning to say that perhaps in the options market we are seeing that is what would prompt, you know, some sort of market action. But personally, I don't know whether intervention would be enough. For instance, if you go back through history and you look at intervention, generally it works when you can say in hindsight, oh, the fundamentals were there as well. And I don't think we're at that point. I think if that happened, if we saw disorderly markets, EU officials may have to do something more drastic, like allowing Greek debt to be restructured.
A lot of people are thinking that eventually we are going to get some kind of debt restructuring in Greece. Do you think that is more likely now?
Yeah, you know, and Merkel said something very, very interesting yesterday morning when she was defending the regulator's decision. She said that sovereign insolvencies will have to be studied. Now, that, I think, was an amazing step forward, because we know that there is no precedent in the EU for such an event. We also know that Merkel is between a rock and a hard place. She's got the EU on one hand saying, well, the Germans have got to pay up, keep the euro together. But the Germans at home don't really want to pay up. They don't think that the Greeks will pay back these loans. So she's got pressure on both sides. And clearly, if the Germans decide that they don't want to keep flowing money into the system, then perhaps some sort of restructuring is inevitable. And
she is becoming more isolated, particularly after the ban on short selling. I mean, presumably that ban can't last that long. I mean, it can't be in place forever.
Well, possibly not. But, you know, another way of looking at this, the way that she is isolated, is really, you know, Europe is a series of sovereign states. The German taxpayers are saying, well, you know, we don't want to give up our autonomy over fiscal policy. She's saying, well, you know, I'm listening to my taxpayers. I'm not really listening to everyone else. This is not a federal system. And, you know, we're not like the US. It's not, you know, New York is not going to complain about, you know, fiscal transfers to Mississippi. This is Europe. This is a sovereign system. And people in Europe look to be protecting that sovereign state. If that's going to be the case, we're not going to see this fiscal cohesion tightening, which is perhaps necessary for more closer or better run monetary union. So I think perhaps some sort of default or restructuring is probably inevitable.
Well, we're actually seeing that the German Finance Minister Schäuble is actually speaking at the moment in Germany. We'll be fascinated to hear what he has to say. We can see pictures of him on the screen at the moment talking about extra regulation. Now, when we look at what's going on at the moment in Asia and elsewhere, how far along this euro crisis, if that's what it is, are we? We're seeing speculators, but are we seeing investors and institutional investors selling?
I would say very likely there's an awful lot of that to come. I would say certainly speculators have been speculating, as we know, for the last few months. Really, it's been the theme of this year. I would say investors are probably just getting going. Well, remember, you know, last year, one of the big themes of last year was, you know, at what point are central banks going to start diversing away from dollars?
Yes.
That theme has completely been kicked into touch this year. That's not going to happen. You know, instead the markets, you know, really coming to the conclusion, well, what sort of level is the euro going to trade at in the next 5 years? Most people would say, well, it's going to be lower now. So really, I think we've got this movement now into dollars. This could last really, you know, at least through this year, but perhaps for the next 2 or so. And the euro, I think, is going to settle at a much lower level, and you know, at some point in the future.
Jane, thank you very much indeed for your insight this morning. Thanks.